A 20-year-old student who was preparing for school at home disappeared under very strange circumstances. From the very first minutes of the investigation, there were many unusual and contradictory leads in this case, but she could not be found for 3 years. Eventually, detectives made progress in this case, but the more they learned, the more confusing this story became. As a result, this disappearance became one of the most mysterious cases in the state. And even after it was closed, many still have questions. Holly Lynn Bobo was born on October 12, 1990, in a small American town called Darden, Tennessee. It was a quiet and peaceful place, with a population of only a few hundred people far from large cities. Holly lived there with her parents and older brother. Their family loved to spend time outdoors. They went hiking, fishing, and swimming in small rivers that passed near their town. In addition, Holly was fond of singing and often took part in church services. After finishing high school, the girl decided to get a medical education and become a nurse. Therefore, Holly entered the division of the University of Tennessee, which was located in a neighboring city. In 2011, when she was 20, the girl devoted most of her time to studying, striving to get the highest grades. In addition, she had a boyfriend with whom she had been together since school, and the couple made big plans for the future. Holly continued to live in her parents' house, since her university was only a few minutes away by car. She was also in no hurry to move out of this house, since her father built it himself, and for their family, this moment played a significant role. On April 13th, Holly woke up at 4:30 in the morning to get ready for school. A few hours later, her parents left for work, and the girl's brother was still sleeping. At 7:30, her boyfriend called her and said he was planning to go hunting on a large plot of land that belonged to Holly's grandmother, and asked if her relatives were sure they would be okay with letting him hunt there. They talked for a few minutes, and the girl said she was leaving for college soon. Sometime later, Holly's neighbor came out of his house and was about to get into his car when he heard a piercing scream coming from the direction of the girl's family's house. Thinking that something might have happened to one of their neighbors, he told his mother, who called Holly's mother. She tried to call her daughter, but the girl did not answer. Worried, her mother decided to go home and check if everything was okay. Her brother, who was still sleeping at the time, did not wake up from the scream itself. But soon after, their dog in the backyard began barking loudly, so he decided to go to the window to check what was going on. The brother saw his sister standing in the garage with a man next to her. He didn't recognize him because he was wearing camouflage. However, the brother immediately thought it was Holly's boyfriend. He knew that he was going to hunt on their grandmother's property nearby, and the guy often wore camouflage. Because the garage was quite far from his brother's window, he couldn't hear what Holly was talking about with this man. However, from her tone, it seemed to him that the girl was unhappy about something. He decided to call his mother and ask if Holly was going to school today, or if she decided to stay home and call her boyfriend. The woman interrupted him and shouted that this was not her boyfriend and told her son to immediately take a gun and shoot him. The young man was very surprised and asked again if she was serious. In response, the woman said yes and hung up. The brother returned to the window and saw that Holly was walking towards the woods that began near their property. The man in camouflage was walking next to her, holding her hand. But this time, the brother realized that he was noticeably taller and larger than her boyfriend. At that point, he was still confused. The young man tried to call his sister, but she did not pick up. He also tried to call her boyfriend, but he did not answer either. In the meantime, his mother had already called the police, but because she worked in the neighboring county, the call was forwarded to another police station. Soon after, the son called her back and told her that Holly had gone towards the woods with a man. Then he took his gun and went outside. but by that time his sister was nowhere to be seen. However, inside the garage, he saw traces of blood and immediately called the police. The officers arrived at the house a few minutes later, but there was no sign of Holly. Her brother told them about the blood in the garage and described this strange man. In addition to the camouflage suit, he was wearing a cap, so he was unable to see his face, even briefly. However, he remembered that the man had long dark hair that reached his back. The brother also said that he did not understand the dialogue between his sister and this man, but he heard that the man had a rather low voice. The police found the whole situation rather strange, but they were in no hurry to launch a full-fledged investigation. The local police department had virtually no experience with such cases, so they did not know what to do. In the first hours, they did not go into the woods to look for the girl, did not seal the house and garage with blood for possible evidence, and did not even question the neighbors. By that time, Holly's parents arrived home, and soon they began to realize that the police were making absolutely no effort to find their daughter. Eventually, after numerous demands to start an investigation, the officers went to comb the woods, talked to neighbors, and involved forensics in the case so that they could analyze the blood in the garage. They also established that Holly's boyfriend could not be the man she went into the woods with. In addition to the fact that, according to her brother, he looked very different from him, the police confirmed that he was hunting at the time of the girl's disappearance. Searching the woods did not bring any results. The investigators requested the location of Holly's phone. At first, it moved north for 30 minutes, then headed in the opposite direction. The last signal came from the woods, a few hundred meters from the girl's house. Then, apparently, the phone was turned off. The police went to comb the place of the last signal, and soon they found the phone there with the SIM card removed, but no trace of Holly herself. The search continued for several days, but they did not bring results. However, during this time, rather strange events began to occur. Residents of their small town began to find things that belonged to Holly on the streets. First, they found her food container, then a receipt with her name on it. Another resident found the girl's school card. All this looked very strange, but the police still could not figure out who was leaving these things. Having no closer to finding the girl, investigators began to study the list of all previously convicted criminals who lived in the area. They soon turned their attention to a local man named Terry, who had a history of assault. After reviewing his file, the police found that all of his victims were about the same age and type as Holly. He was also the right height and build, so investigators began to consider his possible involvement in the kidnapping. They obtained a search warrant for his home, but found no evidence there. They then wiretapped his phone and monitored all of his conversations for several weeks, but even here the police were unable to obtain any evidence of Terry's involvement. Investigators continued to look into other suspects and also continually expanded the search area. With each passing week, more and more volunteers came to their aid, but the search operations still yielded no results. Over the next several months, there was virtually no progress in the case. Eventually, the police stopped searching on the ground, focusing on studying possible suspects. But this led to nothing. Holly's family was devastated. They had no idea what had happened to her, where she was, or if she was alive. Her family also blamed the local police department for not doing enough, especially in the early days. Looking back, the family realized that the police did almost nothing in the first 72 hours, which are critical. But despite their frustration, complaints, and constant attempts to push for a more active investigation, Holly's fate remained unknown. This continued for 3 years, until a rather unexpected turn occurred in this case. In March 2014, the police arrested a local man named Dylan. He was known to the police for his addiction to illegal substances, and the reason for the arrest was charges of illegal possession of a weapon. He was brought in for questioning, where he unexpectedly told about seeing Holly after her abduction. According to him, on the day of the girl's disappearance, he went to his brother Zach to pick up the car. When he entered the living room, he saw his brother and their mutual friend Jason there. However, there was another person in the room. Holly was sitting in a chair and looked scared. The brother told Dylan that he had kidnapped her, then raped the girl, and even recorded the incident on camera. Regarding Holly's fate, Dylan only said that she was killed shortly after the kidnapping, but he did not take part in it. Finally, he added that his brother was wearing a camouflage suit that day. The police brought Zach and Jason in for questioning, but they denied any involvement in Holly's disappearance. Investigators also searched their homes for any evidence and the video recording in which the victim was raped, but were unable to find anything of the sort. Shortly after, the woman went to the police with another unexpected piece of news. According to her, she had previously lived in the same house with a man named Jeffrey, and one day he showed her a fragment of a video in which a man was raping a girl. Jeffrey said that the girl in question was Holly, and the man in the frame was Zach. He also added that the video itself was filmed by his brother, Mark. Detectives met with the woman and asked her to call Jeffrey on the record. She agreed, and during the conversation she touched on the topic of that video. Based on the man's answer, the police had no doubt that he had indeed shown her that recording, and Jeffrey and his brother were arrested. During interrogation, they stated that they had nothing to do with Holly's abduction and did not know what video they were talking about. When investigators played the recording of his conversation with the woman for Jeffrey, he replied that he had not heard her question well. He also added that his ex's name was Holly, and perhaps he had misunderstood her. The police searched their homes, examined all their devices, but were unable to find the video. Moreover, they were unable to find any evidence that the brothers knew the other three suspects. In the end, they had to let the brothers go, since the witnesses' words alone were not enough. However, while the police were trying to establish a connection between these people and Zach, they came across another suspect. Investigators discovered that a man named Shane had called Zach multiple times on the day of Holly's disappearance and decided to talk to him. They assumed that Zach might have asked him for help in getting rid of the body, and during the interrogation, Shane did indeed confirm that he knew where the girl's remains were hidden. The detectives offered him full immunity in exchange for testimony against the other participants in the case, as well as help in finding the body. Shane agreed, but for some reason, he was never able to bring the police to Holly's remains. Eventually, the investigators called off the deal and began to think about how they could get confessions from all these people or find some evidence against them. While they were working in this direction, the police received a call. In September 2014, several men went hunting in the woods, about 30 kilometers from Holly's house. One of them noticed a large bucket in the undergrowth and decided to look inside. When he turned it over, the man saw a human skull and reported it to the police. Forensic scientists found partial remains at the site and sent them to the lab. Investigators immediately thought that they could belong to Holly, and the examination confirmed this version. Due to the fact that the body had been lying there for more than 3 years, it was extremely problematic to establish all the details of the murder, but the cause of death was obvious. A bullet hole was found in the skull, so the police had no doubt that she was shot. After the body was found and the case was reclassified as a homicide, detectives focused on the 4 main suspects they had left: Zach, his brother Dylan, their mutual friend Jason, and their acquaintance Shane. They decided to focus on Jason and brought him in for questioning. The man continued to deny his involvement, but when the police told him he could go to prison for life for murder, Jason agreed to confess against Zach. According to his story, on the day Holly disappeared, he went to Zach's house to buy illegal drugs from him. In addition to Zach, his brother and Shane were in the house. They told him that they had killed the girl, and now he needed to get rid of the evidence. Zach also showed him Holly's body, which was lying in the trunk of his car, wrapped in a blanket. They asked Jason to help him get rid of the body, and he agreed. He said that while Shane was burning Holly's things in a barrel, he and Zach drove to the Tennessee River Bridge to dump the girl in the water. But when they got her out of the trunk, Zach realized she was still alive and shot her. Fearing that the sound of a gunshot could attract witnesses, Zach decided to change his plan and hide the body elsewhere. He loaded Holly back into the car and drove in the other direction, dropping Jason off along the way. Sometime later, when Zach contacted him, he told Jason that he hid the body in the woods. However, he did not tell him the place where the remains were eventually found. As for the moment of the abduction itself, Jason's story also contained some rather strange moments. According to him, initially Zach, along with his brother and Shane, came to Holly's brother to teach him how to make illegal substances. There they saw the girl and apparently told her about their plans. Upon hearing this, she became indignant and started yelling at them to leave. The trio was afraid that the girl would draw attention to their illegal activities and decided to kidnap her. This all seemed rather strange for several reasons. First, Holly's brother stated that he had never had desire to manufacture illegal substances, and he did not discuss anything like that with any of the suspects. Secondly, when he woke up, the guy saw only one person next to his sister. The only one who matched his description in height and build was not Zach, but Shane. It remained unclear where the other two suspects were at that time. Jason also added that after the abduction, 3 of his friends took Holly to an old barn that belonged to Shane's grandmother, where they subjected her to violence. It is noteworthy that the victim's check and school card were found near Shane's house, less than 100 meters away. As for Zach and his brother, the police also managed to find a number of indirect confirmations of their involvement. After the abduction, several of Holly's neighbors said that they saw a white pickup truck driving away from the house at high speed, and Zach had a similar car. His car was also captured on one of the surveillance cameras near the victim's house. Zach's ex-girlfriend told investigators that he sometimes threatened her, saying, "I'll tie you up like Holly, and no one will ever see you again." Several other witnesses said he directly or indirectly told them he was involved in her disappearance. Police also found out that Zach threatened his brother, promising to send him to the same pit next to her if he cooperated with the investigation. Soon, detectives learned from a local resident that after the murder, Shane and Zach offered him guns in exchange for illegal substances, and the man agreed. After that, he threw the guns into the water, from where the police recovered them. However, there was no evidence such as fingerprints or DNA traces, so experts were unable to connect him to this crime. While the prosecution was preparing for the trial, collecting all this information, another unexpected turn occurred in the case. Shane, who initially agreed to the plea deal but failed to lead police to Holly's remains, was found dead in his hotel room. Experts concluded that he did it himself, but the exact reasons for his actions remain unknown. His lawyer blamed the police, insisting that they had groundlessly threatened his client with prison time. The suspects were to be tried separately, with Zach first in line. His trial began in September 2017, 6 years after the murder. He denied his guilt, but Jason's testimony, combined with all the circumstantial evidence, did not work in his favor. A few weeks later, a jury found him guilty of murder, and he received a life sentence for murder, as well as 2 25-year sentences for kidnapping and abuse. The trial of his brother Dylan began in January of the following year. He took the deal and pleaded guilty to assisting in the murder and kidnapping, but the terms of the deal did not require him to confess. In total, he received 35 years in prison without parole. As for Jason himself, given his testimony, the man was sentenced to 8 years in prison with the right to parole earlier than that. Thus, Holly's case was officially solved, but even after the sentences were handed down, questions remained. The main problem was that the prosecution did not have a single serious piece of evidence that would connect the suspects to the kidnapping. The police never found any fingerprints, DNA, or any other evidence that Holly could have been in Zach's car or in his house. The brothers' relatives and lawyers and Shane insisted that the whole case was fabricated, and the police first forced Dylan to give them false testimony, and then did the same with Jason, threatening him with prison time in case of refusal. In addition, Dylan and Jason's versions of that day contradicted each other. Initially, Dylan said that on that day he came to his brother's house to pick up the car and saw Holly and Jason there. Jason, in turn, said that he came to Zach's house after they put Holly's body in the trunk, and also said that Dylan took direct part in the abduction. In addition, another interesting fact was noted. According to the investigation, the person who took Holly into the woods was Shane, since he was the only one who matched her brother's height and build. However, the man had blonde and short hair, while the brothers saw a man with long, dark hair. A former Tennessee Bureau of Investigation officer who was involved in the early stages of the investigation also shared some interesting facts. According to him, they requested the location data of all the suspects' phones, and none of them were near Holly's house. However, we are talking about geolocation by cell towers, which only shows an approximate area of a fairly large size. The investigator also said that they found a palm print on Holly's car, which did not belong to her relatives or friends. It was also compared with the palms of all the suspects, but none of them matched. However, there was no certainty that the print had any connection to the case at all. As for Zach's lawyer, he repeatedly said that a much more likely killer was a man named Terry, who was checked by the police in the first months. As we remember, at that time the police questioned him, searched the house, and installed a wiretap, but did not receive any confirmation of his involvement. In addition, Terry's wife said that she was at home with him that morning, and the man was installing a new bathtub. However, the lawyer said that this alibi could be fake. According to him, in fact, the woman was at work that morning, and Terry called her. The store where the man allegedly bought the bathtub could not confirm that they sold it. Moreover, after kidnapping Holly, Terry cut his long black hair and started wearing it short. According to the lawyer, his wife could not only fabricate an alibi for him, but also help Terry commit crimes. The man had several convictions for abusing other girls, and in some cases, the woman helped him track down the victims. And finally, the experts could not rule out the match of that palm print on Holly's car with Terry's palm, although in all other cases they were sure that the prints did not match. But despite all this, the prosecution insisted that the guilt of their suspects was proven to a sufficient degree, and too many circumstantial factors pointed to their involvement. Jason spent only 3 years in prison, after which he was released early. But a few months later, the man was arrested on charges related to possession of weapons, and he again went behind bars to await trial. In early 2024, the man suddenly claimed that his testimony was fabricated and that he had not actually seen Holly that day. Jason claimed that he had decided to make up the whole story to avoid a life sentence, so he made up the story and made a deal with the police. Immediately after that, Zach filed a motion for a new trial. However, At the end of September 2024, it was rejected. The judge concluded that Jason's words alone were not enough to review the case, and there was other circumstantial evidence against Zach. It is worth noting that at the time of his statement about false testimony, Jason was still waiting for the start of his trial for illegal possession of weapons. A month before the decision on Zach's resentencing, the judge sentenced Jason to 19 years in prison. It cannot be ruled out that his sudden desire to refute his testimony could have been caused by the intention to influence his own process and the possibility of mitigating the sentence. So all three remain behind bars, and the only chance of a retrial would be if their lawyers can find some new evidence that either disproves their involvement or points to the guilt of others. But so far, there has been no progress in that direction, and the prosecution believes that all three are clearly guilty. Share your thoughts on this story in the comments, and don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it.